Joining us now, Tobin Marcus, Wolfe Research head of policy and politics. And good morning, Tobin. I guess, the first thing that the interview accomplished was to exist because it removes the talking point that she refused to sit for an interview. But aside from that, in terms of your observations, how might it change this race, if at all?
I would agree that the main importance of this interview is that it happened and that she got through it largely without incident. Look, I think that the most challenging element of the interview and one of the biggest, clearest vulnerabilities for her is accounting for the shifts in her policy stances from the fairly liberal agenda that she laid out in 2019 when she was trying to appeal to Democratic primary voters to the fairly aggressive pivot to the center that she's been making recently on issues like immigration and energy. I don't think that element of the interview was incredibly compelling. It's hard to imagine people who had really serious concerns about her coming away convinced. But I think she did the most important thing there, which was just to sort of reiterate that she currently has the moderate version of those proposals. Even if she can't account for exactly where the shift came from, which I think is hard to do because it's essentially a political calculation, I think she did send the message she wanted to send, that like I'm running towards the center. I want to appeal to swing voters, to moderates, to Republicans, including with the comment about putting a Republican in her cabinet that you referenced before.
Yeah, I mean, obviously she's sort of running as a sitting vice president, so therefore, to some degree, an extension of the incumbent administration. Do we have evidence, do you think, that voters right now, or the voters that need to be targeted by either campaign, are really hinging on things like policy consistency over years and the lack of flip-flops and the impression of hypocrisy, or giving the ammunition to the other side to say that you're a flip-flopper when it seems as if these are known quantities and you could probably lay charges like that on either side?
Yeah, I'm generally not a believer that flip-flopping is like a huge vulnerability. Since time immemorial, politicians have loved to try to hit their opponents for hypocrisy. In my experience, that generally does not work. So, look, I think the important thing from a voter perspective is there's a quite clear contrast between these two candidates. On a whole range of issues, they are articulating very starkly different directions that they want to take the country. So I think the choice is fairly clear for a lot of people in one direction or the other. For that reason, from a Harris perspective, I think mostly, what she needs to satisfy voters of is that she's not going to come in and then govern as like a secret radical, more so than, to give some really, really compelling account of exactly what it is that changed over time. I don't think that people are going to demand total consistency. They're certainly not going to get total consistency. But if they can satisfy themselves that if she does get elected, she will have a basically reasonable agenda and approach issues in a pragmatic way as they come up, I think that's mission accomplished for her.
So that's from the voters' perspective. From investors' perspective, as you talk to clients, I mean, it seems like a different calculus, because what the market might need to reprice at some point, depending on who wins, is likely policy outcomes. So where do you see the main swing here, considering that we're probably going to have a close call in the congressional breakdown and all the rest of it?
Yeah, so to me, the most important consideration from an investor perspective is that Trump, if he wins, will probably have unified Republican control. And Harris, if she wins, will probably have divided government. I think the Senate leans pretty strongly to Republicans. It'll be very challenging for Democrats to win in Montana, which is probably going to be the make or break state for them. So, when Harris comes in, these tax policy ideas that she's laid out that would probably need to get done on a party line basis, I think realistically probably are not going to be on the table. So in a Harris presidency, I think the policy consequences for markets are more likely to revolve around, on the one hand, how do the bipartisan deals work out on the $4 trillion of taxes that are expiring next year? And on the other hand, how does she handle more routine regulatory issues? What does she do on antitrust? Those kinds of things. And again, I think we will see a basically pragmatic approach from her. On the Trump side, he has a lot more freedom of movement. I think the likelihood that they'll be able to move a party line fiscal bill through the reconciliation process in the Senate is pretty high. So we do have to worry about, what are the things that might get cut to help pay for tax extension. So I think there is some risk of partial IRA rollback or accelerated phase out for that reason. And then, his tariff agenda, he can do largely without congressional input. And that is a very, very, very aggressive agenda. A lot of questions from investors about exactly how serious he is, about which different elements of that. I've had many, many conversations with folks across the buy side about that. But, there on the Trump side, I think there are much more real possibilities of policy change that folks need to get their heads around.
Tobin, there was a Bloomberg News Morning Consult poll that was conducted in key battleground states, and they found that Harris has actually reversed or narrowed Trump's economic advantage on key economic issues in particular, as it pertains to the middle class, helping the middle class, reining in housing costs and government benefits. But voters do still trust Trump more for gas prices and stock market performance. As you think about the various economic issues, which ones do you think will ultimately take the day in terms of garnering voters' trust?
Yeah, I mean, it's really striking how much of a change there has been from Biden to Harris in terms of trust on economic issues, even though at some level, like, she ought to be tied to the same economic performance that we've seen over the course of the past 3.5 years. I think this is in line with what we tend to see internationally when you have leaders in parliamentary systems get replaced because the incumbent is just unpopular and you want to run a different candidate for the same party. They do tend to be able to shed some of that baggage in the way that we are seeing with Harris and Trump. So, you know, we've seen, I think, all throughout a lot of sort of correlation between voters' views on every different element of the economy. I was really struck by a poll a couple of months ago when, huge numbers of voters were saying that, the stock market's down since Biden took office, which obviously it's not. But I think that's just a reflection of, what was then a pervasive negativity, what's now becoming, I think, a more neutral environment for Harris. So, at the margin, any good piece of economic news certainly helps her. Like, she would love to see gas prices come down further. She certainly would love to avoid the outbreak of wider war in the Middle East. But, I don't know that it's going to be one specific thing that kind of, makes or breaks her candidacy. Because the last thing I would say in terms of the macroeconomic environment that markets are focused on right now, like as we wait for these inflation and jobs prints, is, at the margin, to the extent that we see softening and it raises concerns about a possible recession, but also brings rates in based on expectations about the Fed path, I think that does help Harris. Like the 30-year coming down, more important than probably anything else for her.